Welcome to our Virtual Learning Academy program provided by the Wood County Committee on Aging. This program is entitled Tour the Safaris in Africa. So with this recording, we welcome Joan and Bob Calicott joining us today to present our tour.
We should go. You ready for us?
You ready for us?
Okay. I thought you were going to have a commercial here. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This first slide is a map that we have above our fireplace. One of our daughters gave it to us when we retired, and we have plotted all of the sites we have been to, all the places. And there's been quite a few. We're fortunate to have been on every continent so far. And you can see there are lines going across the Atlantic and south of India and across the Pacific. Those represent cruises that we have been on and up the Norwegian coast. So we've put some miles on our shoes and have enjoyed every minute of it.
Actually, we think we've been in about 80 countries and territories. So we've just been very blessed being able to travel. We retired in 2005 and have taken advantage of retirement as much as we could. What we're going to talk to you about today is some of our travels in South Africa. I want to start with, oh, by the way, I'll give you a caveat here. The process we're going to use here is the way we do it at home all the time. I will say something and then Joan will correct me, okay? Understand, that's the way it works. We're going to say we have 4 different types of safaris. One would be the traditional hunting safari. Joan and I definitely are not interested in hunting animals. We don't believe in that. But we have a mini example of, a mini hunt that we went on in one of our trips. But then there's also geological safaris, and we'll talk about the one we took into Namibia. Then more traditional wildlife safaris where you want to see, and in my case, hopefully photograph wildlife in their natural habitats. And then finally, a cultural safari where you're able to actually be with and participate with and get to know a little bit about people of other cultures. So we'll get going with this. This is the map of the southern tip of Africa. You will, so this is Republic of South Africa is down here. Where we visited was in Namibia, which is on the southwestern coast, in Zimbabwe, which is kind of more inland, and then in Tanzania, which is on the eastern coast, and getting up just bordered with Kenya and Uganda.
We also touched on Zambia and Botswana, which are between Namibia and Zimbabwe.
Our first adventure we're going to take you to is in Namibia. It's called Eriksvelda. It's a family-owned 25,000-acre cattle farm and hunting preserve. So obviously from that, they make their living off of raising cattle, but also providing hunting safaris for people in small groups. This is where we spent almost a week at Eriksvelda, and one of the first things we did is we went out with the manager of the farm. Rudy is there with his dog and his rifle, and went on a mini hunting safari. The reason we did that was that was going to be, instead of going shopping in town, we were going shopping for meat on the farm, okay? So we got into the Range Rover and took out on the roads on the farm, and we traveled 3 hours without ever getting off of the farm or doubling back on the same roads. Well, in the process, one reason it took us 3 hours is because as we went, we stopped and
Rudy took care of the animals. He was really doing his work while he was taking us on this little safari. He would make sure the water was flowing. He took out feed, and he knew he was going to be moving the cattle. so he turned down the water at other sites for the cattle.
But the main reason what we were hunting for would be oryx, one of the larger antelopes that they have in Africa. And Rudy would not just take down an animal. What he was looking for, and what reason it took us so long, he wanted to find a over-mature male who would no longer be contributing to keeping the herd going. Right. So he finally found one though, and from a distance of about 100 yards, about a football field, he took down this oryx with one shot right in the middle of his eyes. It was just amazing what a marksman this guy was. But we loaded the carcass onto the Range Rover, so we sat on the carcass as we went back to the ranch. And as soon as we got there, he backed up. The farm hands took it off and started dressing and butchering it. And by dinner time, we had oryx tenderloins.
That was delicious.
Absolutely tenderloin. And for the rest of the week, we had dishes, dinner dishes with oryx meat. So we felt that was using, if you have to take an animal, that would be really putting it to good use. But that's the extent of our hunting safari. Let's go on to a geological safari. We took this trip to started in Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe and then ended up in Namibia. The first the Victoria Falls are about twice as high as Niagara Falls, but they're over a mile long. So they're not actually the tallest or the widest, but when you combine those two, they are the most magnificent waterfalls going.
And we were there in September and October, which of course is their spring. So the water was pretty high. We were on the Zimbabwe side looking over at Zambia. And there actually was a rainforest here in this dry, more or less desert area because of all of the humidity from the falls.
I just read recently where because of the climate change and there's been increasing drought in that area, and the falls last year were reduced to just a trickle. So it really sounds like we were there at a good time. And there's one incredible thing that was going on, as you could see across on the Zambia side. Here are a bunch of people who would dive off of the rocks and right into the area, shallow areas on top of the falls. And we seriously don't recommend that for most seniors to try. Okay. Then we'll go off into western Namibia, and one of the place we went to was the Twyfell. Oh boy!
Twyfell Fountain.
This was actually the first World Heritage Site, and it was designated as a heritage site primarily because of the petroglyphs that are found all over the area. This area has been inhabited for over 6,000 years, and during the course of that time, the inhabitants, well, you know, they painted pictures and actually carved pictures of animals into the rocks. And the interesting thing is, some of the rocks depict seals, and fish. So it's evidence that 6,000 years ago, they had ready access to water and to marine animals. And now, of course, there's less than 2 inches of rain a year, and there's no water.
And they're far inland at this site.
Another magnificent feature in this area, what they call organ pipes, and these are
Eruptions.
Rocks that are pushed up by volcanic activity beneath the surface, actually pushed up vertically, and they go on and on in this one particular area. The other thing is all these rocks with magnificent formations from volcanic activity 1 to 2 million years ago. Part of the area, a little out of Triffelfontein, is an area called Grootberg Canyon, and they're calling it the Grand Canyon of Namibia. It isn't nearly as deep as ours, but it's just an absolutely fantastic area. And we were able to really take advantage of it. We got into a pool right on the edge of that, and we're able to look out over this entire canyon. That was a real plus, especially when that was cold water and it was so hot in the desert. Another area in there was the Erengo Mountain Nature Conservancy. This is another area that's a couple million years old, formed by volcanic activity, but then by water flow. And there's these magnificent rock formations all over this area. This is one of the better known.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's called the Elephant Rock. And I think if you look at it, can you see why it's called the Elephant Rock? Yeah. Actually, here's the.
I didn't understand. Old what?
And this is my favorite. These boulders, and you can see how humongous they are. Here I am standing beneath this boulder. How that's ever happened, it just boggles the mind. But they're just magnificent. And the fields around here are littered with these kind of boulders. And another amazing thing is the national flower of Namibia is called a Weltschia. And they're not very pretty, but boy, you got to give them credit for courage and longevity. This particular plant could well be over 100 years old, and they have found a way to survive with virtually no moisture, no water at all. Another phenomenon is
the Africans are so creative in how they name things. This is one that really tickled us. It's the no can die tree, because no matter what happens, it always revives itself.
And they're literally growing out of rocks. They're just absolutely amazing. And they said, our guide said, no matter what you do to them, they'll come back next year. Then another amazing part of this geological tour is the Skeleton Coast.
And it is on the western coast of Africa, so it's on the Atlantic, and it's along what they call the Benguela Current, which goes from South Africa all the way north up into Angola. And it's, well, 1,200 miles long, I think. It's really quite extensive.
And it's a very cold current. And what happens is that current then meets the warm air coming off of the deserts to the east. And when they collide, they create fog. So this area, even though it gets an average of 0.8 of an inch of rain a year, it gets 180 days on average of fog every morning.
Which is what saves the plants,
and
really, yeah.
The only thing that really survives then is this moss that grows quite prolific all over the area. And when the fog is in, the moss absorbs the moisture and turns all different colors. But then when it loses the moisture, it turns back brown again, like you see here. Unfortunately, there wasn't any fog when we were there, one of the few days, so we couldn't see the moss in its other colors.
A little note on why it's called the Skeleton Coast, because of the Benguela Current, the waters also are very rough. And there were a lot of sea wrecks there. And if your ship wrecked and you survived the wreck, you probably perished in the desert. So there were a lot of skeletons of not only ships, but of humans.
Then also went to the further south after the Skeleton Coast, came across the Cape Cross seal colony. This is Cape Cross because this was a landing spot for an early European explorer, but it is just thousands and thousands of seals in this area.
And the aroma is not something that you would go there for.
Not a good thing, not a good thing. You didn't want to stay very long, but it was just amazing to see all of these seals. And of course, there's plenty of food for them from the ocean at this point. Then the Namib Desert is
actually the oldest desert on Earth.
Yeah.
And it too is about 1,200 miles long and 200 miles deep inland.
It figures about 80 million years old. But it's the strangest thing here. It's where the ocean ends and the desert begins, and there's no area between them. You think there'd be some sort of vegetation or something, but it isn't. All of a sudden, the ocean ends, and then you see the dunes rising immediately. And they're some of the highest, the second highest dunes in the world. But
And
also,
they're very hard to climb.
oh yeah, almost impossible for us. But you see here, here's one of the vehicles taking people on tour to this area. But they have very limited time where they can tour to get into the Namibia because of the rising tide will eliminate any possibility of access on a vehicle. And here's give you an example of the height of these dunes. This the dune cruiser came up on the other side. When they get over the top, all they do is just let the vehicle come down. They don't have to accelerate
I'll
off.
put in neutral.
It just comes straight down that hill. That's quite a ride. That's a very, very high dune. And also, what you find as we're going through the dunes here is they say that because the winds are so extreme, that every day they found surprises in the desert, and the dunes will have different formations. And evidently,
And exposures.
the night
Yeah.
before, it exposed a couple of skeletons in this portion of the desert. And kind of as a to juxtapose that against a skeleton from perishing in the desert, we weren't perishing here. We took a lunch
Oyster
break,
on the half shell, champagne,
smoked salmon.
fresh fruit. It was just quite incredible.
And while we were having this very delightful lunch, the guide here said, well, look around, look into this clump of grass next to us. And you see it in this little indistinct bird. Turns out that is called a Boon Lark. And it is a very rare bird that's found only in a 50 by 150 kilometer area in the Namibia desert. And here we were just on a tour, and being able to watch this little guy, and he stayed and performed for us for the longest time. Well, according to our guide, serious birders spend thousands and thousands of dollars to get here and take a safari to find this little bird. And here he joined us for lunch, so kind of ironic. As kind of a segue here, we wanted to show you that we started out our tour of Tanzania at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro. We camped there for a few days. And I think the significance was this may be one of the last decades where you'll be able to talk about the snows of Kilimanjaro. They are disappearing very rapidly because of climate change. And we were very fortunate to see it while it still had some
We were there
snow.
in 2013. So.
And one of the first things we found about in the Kilimanjaro area, it's right on the border between Tanzania and Kenya. And it turns out, this is a border marker here. Quite often, if the guides or the tour groups are careless and they cross over into Kenya, it turns out that the Kenyan government has patrols waiting behind these shrubs to nab and arrest the people who've come across there and charge quite a bit of money to be able to get back across the border.
And often are imprisoned.
And one of the things we want to show you about this is all during our trip through Tanzania, we had a guide, and this is a Maasai guide, and so he was able to interpret and not only interpret with the Maasai that we met, but also be able to tell us about the wildlife and that kind of thing.
He was the wandering ones, what they call it.
Nomadic.
He was a nomadic Maasai.
And we'll talk about them a little bit later. So onto our wildlife safari. This takes in the Chobe National Park in Botswana and the Serengeti Plains in Tanzania and the Ngoro Crater
In Tanzania.
And the first thing most people go in this area for wildlife expedition is to see the Big Five, okay? And the Big Five, we can start with an elephant. And I might add that this elephant was in our campsite when we got back after being out during the day. And you notice how his ears are forward. Our guide immediately said, get out of that area right now, because when the ears are forward, that means that they are warning you that they're going to be aggressive. And he was aggressive because his whole family was there. But on elephants, when we first got to Chobe, we were in a boat and cruising along one of the lakes there. And
we were so excited to see this elephant. Wow, an elephant.
Yeah. And soon after the first one came out, here came a couple more out from the bushes. And then finally, the entire family was right there next to us, drinking out of the
river.
And we were so excited. We got to see this whole family of elephants. When we got back from the water cruise, got into a Range Rover and went over the hill. And here, not only one family, just hundreds of families of elephants. It's just absolutely a magnificent sight to see all of these elephants. Then the second of the big five is the rhinoceros. And I think most of us know that the rhinoceros is endangered. They're losing the population very rapidly, and for the ridiculous reason that the horns are so coveted by Oriental people for a number of
aphrodisiacs.
Yeah. But behind these, we want to point out
the flamingos.
Flamingos, hundreds and hundreds of flamingos were in this lake, and this is a picture in the Ngoro crater,
which we'll be talking about.
Matter of fact, right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this crater was a mountain as large as Kilimanjaro about 2 to 3 million years ago, and it had an explosion, and then he ultimately collapsed into itself. So it's actually now it's a caldera and caldera, and I consider it to be like the Garden of Eden, and there are so many animals in there, but they all are there together. They respect each other and they do hunt each other, as we'll see a little bit later. But nevertheless, we watched some wildebeest sitting on one side of the lake, and all of a sudden they all turned and looked one way, and across the lake was a lion, and it was sauntering down to the lake, and then it lay down, and all the wildebeest relaxed and went on doing their grazing. So they all know how to get along together.
The third of the big five is the leopard. This is leopard. And this is a leopard cub. We came across a whole family of them up in the trees. I think Mama told them to stay in the trees because we were around. And then a little bit later, here comes Mama with 3 cubs right into the area where a whole bunch of the tour vehicles were parked, watching other things going on. And the incredible thing about this is this happened all the time when vehicles would be stopped looking at something. The animals would come right by and through where the vehicles were, totally ignoring us and paying no attention to us whatsoever. The irony is that if anybody would step out of that vehicle onto the ground, we would literally be dead meat. They would be after you that quickly. So it's just the strangest thing that they wouldn't bother you as long as you were in the vehicles. Now here's one of this is number 4 of the big five, the Cape buffalo. These guys might attack you no matter where you are. They are supposedly the meanest of the animals anywhere in Africa. And they're huge and they're vicious. Then the 5th one is the one we most think about, I think, is the lion. Now this guy, this is the male of the pride, and he's sitting there in the shade somewhat because he has just enjoyed a meal, and the meal was a Cape buffalo that the women in the pride, the lionesses, they're the ones that do the hunting, and they took down a water buffalo, and his carcass is right about here. But we didn't get there during that time, but we got there when the lions had backed off of the carcass because the Cape buffalo were returning, and when they did that, the lions backed off, and here they were just in a waiting mode. They weren't doing anything. They were just watching. And eventually, after a long time, the Cape buffalo left. You can see the huge herd of Cape buffaloes that's migrating this way.
And again, this is in Ngorongoro.
So, and it was just an amazing thing to see the pride jockeying between positions and everything. But it wasn't the vicious hunt that you visualize. You know, this was just wait. They had all the time in the world. And of course, while they were waiting, let's see. Well, let's see.
This boat ahead. As I said originally.
Okay. Well,
this was our vehicle.
We're waiting and watching. This is our vehicle, and we were one of the first on that site. We were soon joined by a bunch of other vehicles. So you got used to being, even though you were out in these wild areas, you weren't alone. And what would happen is when one vehicle would spot something going on, have a sighting, they would radio the other companies to let them know of that sighting. Because if they didn't do that, then if the other companies got a sighting, they wouldn't let you know.
So it was a cooperative venture.
But the interesting thing is that all these vehicles are there watching these lions in the Cape Buffalo with their the standoff. They were looking for shade. So here you see one of the lions just came right into where the vehicles are and got into the shade of that one vehicle. Another one actually got underneath the vehicle and was sleeping underneath the vehicle.
And that vehicle could not move as long as the lion stayed underneath there.
Our guide told us that it was a severe penalty, fine, if you disturbed any of the animals. So he was had to stay there until that animal woke up and decided to move on. We didn't stay for that.
Wasn't ours.
Yeah. And then encounters with other beasts. We have the crocodiles. This is this is taken from the boat we were on. This is about a 6-foot monitor lizard. Had taken some animal. You see, he's carrying a carcass in his mouth there, and he's on shore. And we look to the left, and here's this crocodile at a very rapid pace, going right by us, totally ignoring us. But he's going,
thankfully,
and heading right for the shore. And when he gets to the shore, he doesn't stop. He goes right after that monitor lizard, and he doesn't stop until he takes it away from her. Here you can see he's already gotten the carcass, and there's the monitor lizard has lost his meal, and that's the law of the jungle, I guess. The other fantastic experience we had
on the Serengeti. This is the midst of their migration. It's zebras and wildebeest.
And what they do, there are literally tens of thousands of these animals follow the rain. So as the rain moves during the rainy monsoon season, it generally goes in a clockwise fashion. So the animals just follow that in thousands. And here's, if you notice this is one of this is the migration. And in the distance, you see this outcropping of rocks. This is a very common thing on the Serengeti Plains to have these rock outcroppings. And the thing is, nearly every rock outcropping will have a predator, a family, a pride in that copse. And here's one, you see a lioness keeping lookout in that copse. And what they do, they're very clever. Rather than use up energy to go after the herd, they let the herds come to them. And what they're looking for is something like this, where you have them, either the zebras or the wildebeest lagging behind because they're giving birth. These two calves had literally just dropped from their mothers. The mothers forced them to stand up and start going along with them. Now you notice they're supporting them, but they're causing them to get going, because if they wouldn't, that's what's going to be dinner for the lions that evening. And here you see, this is a zebra that didn't quite make it. And you see one of the lion cubs watching over the corpse that's been dragged up into that copse. Other beasts, this is The hippopotamus, we make fun of them, but you shouldn't make fun of them. They're way up to 6,000 pounds.
We were going on a hot air balloon ride, and we were starting out at 5 in the morning, and it was dark. And we came up to a hippopotamus who didn't like the headlights of the Jeep and almost rammed us. And we would have been done if it had.
This below this picture, this is what you call a pool, a hippo pool, and they're just, well, it could be several dozen hippos, and it's disgusting because they're all in kind of still water, and when they defecate, they have they start swinging their tail around, so it kind of is like a manure spreader, and stuff is spraying all over the place. And it's just disgusting, and another malodorous area. And then in contrast, you have the beautiful gentle giraffes are all over. And you have so many different species of antelope that we can't even begin to show you all of them, but they're just magnificent animals in abundance all over. And then there's the animal that only a mother could love, this face, you know, the warthog. But then very, very importantly, we find out are the scavengers. One of the animal scavengers is a hyena that goes after the carcasses very rapidly. And then there's the birds, and these are the very ugly marabou storks, but they're gigantic. They have 6-foot wingspans and stand about 4 feet high. They're ugly as all get out, but they are active scavengers. And the one we normally associate with being scavengers are the vultures. And here is
and our guide said, if we didn't have vultures in the deserts, it would be a mess, because there's so many carcasses that are not finished by the animals that actually hunt them. And it's the vultures who keep the areas clean.
Here we're on an elephant carcass, and they will literally pick it clean. So they're the garbage collectors.
So we have a different respect for the vultures now.
And then some other birds of the area. This is a yellow-billed stork, really weird in the way he sits on the ground. And a weaver bird. I'll let Joan talk about the weaver bird.
The weaver birds are very interesting. First of all, the colors are just gorgeous. And the male will work to build or to weave a nest. And the female comes along and says yay or nay. And if it's nay, he starts all over again. And these are individual nests, but they tend to congregate, and they build condo nests. And sometimes the nests are so heavy, as you can see this one, that the actual tree breaks down, the branch breaks down. But you can see all of the entries to the nests here over on the left. And so they call them weaver bird condos.
And when we get to the a bay by the ocean, pied avocets, beautiful birds, pied kingfishers, and their answer to the eagle is they call an African fish eagle, very similar to our eagles, so a little bit smaller. African spoonbills, red-billed hornbill, my favorite.
Oh, absolutely gorgeous bird. Just you look at all the colors on it. It really should be a rainbow bird. But it's the lilac breast is so distinctive.
And he enjoyed just sitting there, letting us taking pictures of them. And two other magnificent birds.
That gray-crowned crane was so graceful. It would just walk along, and it was just all grace.
And the saddle-billed stork, magnificent bird. A little inland bird, a francolin. And then
Bear starling
is a beautiful bird. I wish we had theirs. Maybe we wouldn't dislike them so much. A beautiful bird. And then another really weird bird, a secretary bird.
And it gets that name because its sound is like it's typing.
And then another bird with a native name to it, go-away bird. And the reason they call it a go-away bird is what it will do is if it sees hunters going through an area or anything, it'll start calling, go away, go away, go away. And the hunters get very upset because it
scares off.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to the cultural safari. And here we're visiting a Himba tribe. a nomadic Maasai and the farming Maasai. The Himba tribe was in Namibia, and this is a tribe.
Very, very remote.
It took us 45 minutes of driving in an off-road vehicle to actually get to the site itself.
There really wasn't a road. It was a series of holes that you went over.
To be able to visit a Himba tribe, you had to first get permission. So when we pulled up, they sent a representative of the tribe out, and one of the first things you do with the African natives in all the areas is you introduce yourself. You say, my name is so-and-so, hello, you know, that kind of, you don't just start talking to them. So here, our guide is telling us about what's going to happen. She has given us permission to go visit it with the tribe. And also she had to get permission from, this is the wife of the chief of the Herero tribe, which owns this particular land and has allowed the Himba to be able to stay on that land. Now, the Himba have not assimilated at all into what is becoming a modern society. So they are very much loners. They live in
this is home.
This is home. Yeah.
With a fireplace and a cooking stove in front. And we did get inside one for a demonstration, which we'll show a little bit later.
And this is their insect control. What they do is let spiders build webs, and then the flies get caught in there, so they don't have to, they have fewer problems with flies. And this is a lady who was serving kind of as the matriarch of the village. And it turned out she had been divorced by her husband. And all you had to do to divorce somebody was say, I divorce you. And he left. So she was all alone and kind of at the mercy of the rest of the village. But evidently she was held in high regard because she did a lot of the speaking for the group through an interpreter.
And we never saw a man when we were in that village for 2 to 3 hours, and we never saw a man because they were out taking care of their cattle.
Now,
there's a very scarcity of water there.
So the Himba are known, well, the Himba women, first of all, never take a bath. They've never been in water. They never bathe in water. Instead, what they do is they have a mixture
of okra and butterfat that they regularly apply to their skin. And that's part of the reason their color is a little bit orangish from the okra.
Okra.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. But so this is in lieu of bathing. They almost daily cover themselves with this material. The other thing is their hair. The older they are, the more hair they have, and the more elaborate their hairdos become. And to see what they do and make it is really astonishing. You see here,
ash.
She is braiding the hair with ash, mud, and elephant dung. That's what they use to braid their hair. And you can see, in this case, it braids. This is a younger girl. The older woman will have cakes in the braids or in the hair, more elaborate. This is a picture of the youngsters, of a youngster having his snack of mashed corn. And they live primarily off of corn primarily off of corn, not much else. And this was interesting. This little guy came out of the hut carrying a machete. And, we didn't pursue that very much, but it made a good photograph. And then, as with all the cases with every tribe you'd visit, they would dance for you. And they had ceremonial dances, very colorful, and they really get into it. And they also
offer their crafts, and they all are so proud. They form a big circle and display everything that they've made. And we all were just really taken by all the efforts that they made. So we did support their efforts there.
Now we'll go visit a Maasai tribe, and there's two. The first is the nomadic Maasai. These are the tribes that continually roam around through the area, and in fact, through several countries to find grasses for their cattle. Their wealth is determined by the cattle they have. And
There's another picture of the
they
cattle.
dance, yeah. And the thing that struck us, however, every evening they bring the cattle inside of the village for safety purposes, and then they close it off with prickly bushes so that animals can't come in. But because the animals are in there, you have a lot of
Flies.
stuff going on.
Flies. Look
all
at that
over.
little one. I
Yeah.
had all I could do not to try to get those flies off of
Yeah.
it.
And this young lady with
They love beads.
the beads, but the flies all over them. But they were they're really great and very welcoming to us.
Yeah, so this is a very wealthy Maasai man, and he has generally the herders are their children, and they're boys that are younger and younger, under 10 years old, that are herding these 40 to 50 head of cattle every day. And there's a real issue because the government wants the children to get an education, and the fathers want the children to stay and take care of the herds.
And so if the boy children choose to go to school, they're in danger of losing their inheritance, which would be a portion of the father's cattle. They would lose that because they would be considered unfaithful to their family. So they've got a real dilemma. And then we get into the Maasai village of the who are called either pastoral
or agricultural
Maasai. And these people have stabilized villages. Some of them still have these huts, but in many cases they're getting into actual housing. And here, when we arrived at this village, we were greeted by the Maasai women.
They love to dance and sing. Yeah.
We're not getting audio, so
We tried to wear those collars and bounce them like that, and it just didn't happen. I don't know how they do it, but I could not get it to do it.
But after they greeted us, then the women were all dressed in native garb, and then they performed duties of rethatching the roof, or I didn't put that in.
Even we had to redo the mud on the side of the huts too. So the women were so particular about washing our hands off after we had done the mud work on the hut. They were really sweet.
And then the women all danced together, but then the men got into it too. And the Maasai are known for their jumping. And you can see this is one of the Maasai warriors, how high he's jumping off the ground. I'm looking and figuring it out, and we determined that white men can't jump. Yeah, we really admire how straight they can go with their legs straight out like that. And then we ended this visit at this village with a
Chief.
Interview with the chief, and he was an extremely well-educated man. He spoke very fluent English, and it was just a wonderful conversation to have with him. And he talked about the dilemma of the Maasai being educated and assimilating and that kind of thing. But for the most part, the Maasai are doing a lot better job than the Himba. And then we're getting close to time, but I want to talk about our camping experience. This was our campground on the Serengeti, and now they were
en suite though.
They're very nice tents, so, and we could sleep on a.
This is our sink, our outdoor sink.
And inside we had our own private toilet and our shower, and with running water. However, to get the running water,
the natives who worked at the camp had to bring over these 5-gallon buckets. The blue one was cold water for the throne, and the white one was warm water for the shower. And you saw our lovely shower head. So you were very, very prudent with the use of the water for showering.
So we had a flush john for 5 gallons worth of water. But and I should say, we could not leave our huts, our tents, without having a guide or a native along with us. It was that real, the problems. Like I said, the one day we showed up, a family of elephants was in the campsite, and one morning we got up and there was a big cat print right outside of the front of our tent. So it was real that you should be concerned. And just a couple comments about the roads over there. In some cases, in the cities, you would have paved roads that went out a ways, maybe to the first or second suburbs. But this is what most of the roads look like in good conditions. Oh, I guess here was one of the guides who stayed. If we had to get out of our tent at night, he would come with us, and he was equipped with the bow and arrow and take care of us. But in many cases, particularly rainy season, this is what those roads start looking like. They are literally a mess, and even with the four-wheel drive vehicles, our drivers had a heck of a time getting through some of these roads.
But speaking of our drivers, to us, it was incredible how they could sight animals, a quarter to half a mile away. They could see these animals. It was just amazing.
And here's a sight you don't see very often on U.S. highways, danger elephant crossing. But one of the roads are not good, and this was a common thing to get a flat tire. Every vehicle we were in had at least one spare tire with it in order to take care of a flat. So it was always adventure, not only if you're in the field, but on the roads over there. Just a shot of the balloon that we went up in to take a trip over the Serengeti. It was just a magnificent way to view the Serengeti plant.
And there we had a lovely lunch too after the ride, and they had a loo with the view there. That was really funny.
Okay, so that's is our presentation. We would welcome any questions. I know that's a really quick tour through South Africa, but.
Thank you so much, Bob and Joan, for that. I felt like I was there myself, so we appreciate that. I'm going to stop the recording.